Lovely to see you. Welcome to this class on the principle of the axis of length. Now, full disclosure, I have never taught a class primarily around this principle before. And this principle has been sort of elaborated latterly from Bartenieff's kind of principles through the work of Karen Studd and Laura Cox. And it's again this work of bringing that which is implicit, that we take for granted all the time, to make it really explicit. So the axis of length helps remind us that we as a human form are more length than we are width and depth. That our spine is aligned in relationship with gravity, and we are locomoting on 2 feet with this roughly bilateral symmetry that differentiates us from other mammals that maybe have their spines in this orientation to gravity, like the dog that was just in the room. So working with this vertical spine doesn't mean only staying upright, of course, but it's what we can think about in terms of our vertical throughness, of how our parts connect somehow in relationship to gravity while standing. So we'll be doing more standing, locomoting, and this kind of work today. What else did I want to say about it was that it becomes interesting for me to play with this concept with the idea of more of a stable axis of length or more of a mobile axis of length, something that can be actually quite stable, but I can still come off my center of gravity, or I can really allow my spine to condense and to mold and carve and adapt. That's about it, really, for the axis of length. Please come to standing. And as usual, for most of this work, you really don't need to see me. So if you don't want to look at the screen, that's fine. And take a comfortable position on 2 feet to stand, but don't feel like you need to lock your joints to stay there. And start to sense underneath your feet where your weight is falling. Sensing into the subtle adjustments through your ankles, through your knees, through your hips, through into spine, into skull. And so recalling these 2 forces that we can work with, gravity connecting us to the ground, and base of support, supporting us, thrusting us upwards. And from standing, let's find a roll through the spine, starting at the top of the skull, allowing head to nod forward and pouring the weight through the skull, heavy hands, heavy shoulders, condensing the space in front of your body. Folding this axis of length towards the floor, and when your hands reach the floor, you can start to walk out to all fours. If you would like to extend through the legs and find a long line of heels to skull, you can do that, or you can keep your knees in contact with the ground. And you can shift from right to left as you do this. No need to feel like you have to stay somewhere in between your hands the whole time. And let's carry this shape back to standing, pushing your way back to your feet, sending the pelvis high, softening through the knees, rolling back up your spine. And come to stand again to sense the whole of your skeleton, the whole of your structure, the whole of you in relationship to the ground with 2 feet. Soles of the feet connecting to the earth. And you might shift a little left or right or back towards the heels or towards the balls of your feet. We'll do that a few more times, taking head forward, softening through the hips and the knees and the ankles, padding your way out, finding a long spine. You can explore again, taking it through into hands and toes, or to hands and shins. Using this to warm up the sense of the parts of your body, the right and the left, the up and the down, the low and the high, front and the back of your body. And finding it a third time. When you're on all fours, you might explore a little condensing of spine side to side, or finding a curve and an arch. Mobilizing this skull-sacrum relationship, head-tail connection. And let's tuck toes and push our way back to stand again. Rolling up through the spine, pushing down into gravity to find this thrust back up through the spine, through to the top of the skull. And so often in movement training and somatic classes and dance classes, there's this image of a plumb line, maybe dropping somewhere between the ears, behind the eyes, down through the roof of the mouth, through the throat, behind the breastbone, down through the center of the pelvis. And it can be a useful way of orienting this sense of the vertical throughness of your body. But I really don't want to encourage a use of that visualization of a central axis to be something that you have to idealize or make something that you have to fix yourself to or boss yourself into finding some sort of symmetry when that's not your experience. And so even though this plumb line might exist as a geometrical concept, kind of straight axis standing on the earth in this vertical orientation, again, it's really relative to your own body's architecture, your own experience of how you sense the ground and feel this vertical throughness as a whole experience rather than a line. All right. Let's carry this vertical upright posture back down to the ground again, this time keeping more long through torso, bending at the knees and the ankles, and then carrying spine forward from there. And then when you get down to the ground, let's come to sit. And you can sit legs long, legs crossed, sitting on your shins if you like. If you want to sit on a cushion, that's very welcome. I'm going to sit on a cushion. And let's explore this inner axis, no longer in this sagittal orientation that we were just exploring with a forward and back weight shift. Let's find a rotation, taking pelvis to the right, and then the rest of the spine can follow, and the skull can turn. And then pelvis can bring us back to the middle. And this can be very gentle, it doesn't need to be your full extension. This might be the first thing that you've been doing with your spine in this rotation all day, and really make sense for the warmth of your body so far. So tailbone through into skull, sacral returns, successive sequencing through the spine to bring the skull back. Sensing that journey from lower spine to upper spine, and then lower back into the spine and skull. Doing that a few times to the right and to the left, however feels comfortable. And you can use your hands on your knees, on your body to increase that if you want, to give you a bit of leverage. That might not feel very safe or nice for your vertebrae, so you can keep it more small. And then let's go head leading, then the shoulders, then rib cage and pelvis. And then let's return from the head leading. Eyes, neck, torso, pelvis. And then bringing the head back first, and then the shoulders and the rib cage, trying to sequence back down the spine from the top to the bottom. Might feel a bit strange, we don't often do this in class, or in yoga classes or Pilates classes or dance classes even. Okay, and then let's, for the sake of it, take pelvis leading to rotate to one side, and then head leading to return. Pelvis leading to rotate to the left, and then head initiating us to return. If you wish to adjust how you're sitting at any time, always feel free. And as I do this, I can feel how there are certain pathways that I would prefer to do, that I make an initiation to come back in a very habitual way, and it takes some mental activity to direct myself to make a slightly different choice. All right, I think that's enough of that. So let's go to all the way into the ground and find our friend the heel rock. And so heel rock being the flexion extension through the ankle joints. Finding this vertical throughness now in this orientation to gravity where we are no longer on 2 feet but connecting through the back surface. Taking a few moments here in heel rock, noticing the tempo that you chose. Always feel free to add in a bend through the knees if that's more comfortable, to get this heel rock pattern flowing through the parts. Option always of having soles of the feet on the ground. And notice where you might be able to let go a little bit through heel rock. Is the skull nodding? Is rib cage softening? Is breastbone releasing into gravity? What about the pelvis? And then go ahead and just rock through the right foot, the right ankle. And then switching to the left. Go back to the right. And on the left. And then both together. And notice what you notice from that. Feel free to pause at any time and start again. This heel rock, up to go down, down to go up, with a sense of ongoingness to it. But yes, pause whenever you feel like pausing is good. You can allow your legs to be released here, or take a recuperation in the supine hook position with the knees bent. And if you pause and have a think about how we might initiate again to begin, let's find it on the end of the exhale. And experiment a little with the arms. We haven't really mentioned those so much. Take the arms above the head, a little higher. Take the arms down by your sides. Have the palms contacting the ground. How do the arms connect into your heel rock? Great, slow it down. Whatever tempo you chose, slow it down. And you can make the flexion and the extension through the ankles even smaller and softer. Or if you're on flat feet, this pulsation between heels and balls of feet can be even more small, gentle, subtle. Slowing down to a stop eventually. And then easily rolling yourself to your front. Head can be underneath the hands, forehead resting on the back of the hands. And tuck your toes underneath you and find a rock on your front surface. And you might want to adjust your hands underneath your head if that's a bit too close to your torso. You might want to give yourself a bit more space. Or you might want to grab a cushion again and stick your head on the cushion. And then let's maybe bring forearms underneath on the ground with the hands onto the ground, and we can push from the hands to the feet, from the feet to the hands. And so our vertical throughness now has this curve into the back space. No longer in one long plumb line. And then take a pause whenever you wish. And you can do just the arms, just the palms connecting into shoulder blades, into the spine, or just the toes again. And you might experiment with where your eyes are. If you're looking down, back of neck is longer. If you're looking in front of you, back of neck is more constricted, but we have this horizon that our bodies are seeking to find when we're standing. And you can also explore the arms further away from you, closer. You get more leverage with the forearm. So if you're just palms on the floor, it can be a little harder to feel. And we have this downward thrust of the arms into the ground, toes down into the ground with this up-downness of head-tail going on. And then release. Take a little jiggle of pelvis side-side. Wagging the tail of the dog. And then pushing yourself back onto your back. Let's come back into the supine hook position with the knees bent. Then we'll take a diagonal knee reach. So allowing the soles of the feet to stay where they are on the floor. Weight of the knees carries over to one side, taking with it the pelvis, and the spine can find that rotation that we were doing earlier. Head looking towards the opposite hand. A couple of breaths here. And then to return, let's initiate heels, pelvis, and head at the same time. Right at the end of the exhale, finding the skull and the heels and the pelvis all arriving at the same time. And then let's take it lower to upper again. So knees go, pelvis goes, spine goes, head follows to the opposite hand. Couple of breaths, feeling this rotation of your axis of length now. And then to return, activating through heels, head, and skull. And do that right and left a couple more times in your own timing. You might want to take it even slower. Or you might explore going into more of a passive release through the legs to see where spine goes. But if that feels too dramatic to just let your legs go, feel free to carry them more steadily. Both are useful, but they both achieve different things. Sometimes it can be nice to feel the weight of your body through this letting go and falling. Sometimes the activation of the weight on that return can help you also sense the weight of your legs and the weight of your skull. Later we'll explore more traveling and this idea of falling and walking. And here we get to play a little bit with it, even just a tiny amount. Allowing the weight of the legs to move and either be caught midway or fall all the way to the ground. And if your eyes are closed, feel free to open your eyes occasionally to see that hand in the up space. Recalling that the eyes are relatively near the top of the spine, so we can include skull and spine through eyes. Okay, let's add to this our thigh lift pattern. So you can keep the skull more in the center as the knees go, and then let's just take a swing through the top leg, connecting sole of the foot, side of foot to the floor, and then returning the foot and the thighs and the pelvis, and then knees to one side. Thigh lift, return from thigh lift, return from diagonal knee reach. And this time maybe skull wants to roll in the direction of the leg, that's fine. You may even feel the side of the rib cage coming to the ground as that leg rolls over the top. Feeling our left side and right side as defined by rib cage and pelvis, as well as limbs. Okay, I think that's enough of those. We'll come back to them in a moment. In your own way, explore being laid on the ground, pushing yourself to sit, folding your way back into the ground. So the activity is about level change from lying to sitting, and exploring how your axis of length does that. Does it condense a little bit and roll up as we found in standing? Is it about a rotation? Initiating to roll you into the ground. We haven't done a lot of side-sidedness through the spine, but that could also be an option of finding a lateral condensing through the side. You might find more of this more stable spine, where more of the limbs have to participate. Maybe you can find spine really condensing, extending, rotating. If your eyes are closed, give yourself the opportunity to use sight as that spatial intent to bring you off the ground. But equally, you can explore your axis of length with eyes closed. Sensing into this alignment of skull, torso, pelvis, legs in different ways. Now this one depends on your base, your ground. So if you're on carpet, it might not work so easily. We were playing with this upper-lower propulsion, well, before propulsion pattern. Explore how it might be to turn into an earthworm, where your tail can lead and then your upper can follow. Or your upper might lead and then your lower might extend. You might have to make some creative choices based on the space you're in to keep changing direction. It's not quite an earthworm because you're definitely using your limbs, but there's a sense of the simultaneity of the upper pushing or the lower reaching or drawing in. And I see that Laura is exploring it on her back, so you can equally find it bringing your feet to the ground, press away. If you have a wall, it can be quite satisfying to feel your axis of length with a wall. Pressing soles of the feet into the ground, sequence through to skull. And if you don't have a slidey floor or a wall, that's fine. You can continue to find this extension through the spine in different ways. Okay, let's bring it to all fours and then, no, let's bring it to our belly and find a little bit more of this side-sidedness. So we can play with flexing the elbow and the knee towards each other on the same side and seeing all the way to your toes. Give them a little wiggle, you might be able to see them. And if you can't see your toes, maybe it's looking towards the elbow or looking towards your hand. I say the toes because I was just tipping my foot up to see it, but it doesn't need to happen really. And then you can extend extend through that side. Condense to the other side. Elbow and knee, maybe they don't connect, maybe they do. If they connect, pelvis comes really off the ground perhaps, depending on your hip sockets. Head and tail condensed to one side. And then you can see along the ground and allow your axis of length to condense to the other side. And then finding it a few times. If we were in a big studio, I would ask us to push off that foot and treble. If you have space to do that, feel free. You have to tuck your toe underneath you to get the ball of the foot to push off that toe. If you don't have the space or a slide enough floor, you can still explore condensing and maybe tucking and just finding a little push. The beginning of that movement is incredibly useful to play with because this connection of ball of foot into knee, into hip is definitely something that we don't do in walking in this way. Oh, okay. Enough of being on your front for a moment, come up. Take a little recuperation however you would like to recuperate. Might be a little shake, might be a moment of stillness. And then we'll come back to all fours. And again, you're going to have to get creative about your direction of travel. You might need to keep changing direction or finding a curved pathway so you don't run out of room. But the locomotion here is through the sides of the body. It will be the equivalent of walking and bringing your right arm forward as you stepped with the right foot. So slide left knee towards left hand and then allow the left hand to just creep forward a little bit. And so right knee and right hand. And I'm initiating ever so slightly more from the leg than from the arm because the reach of the hand is always really, really easy because we live more easily in this kind of reach of the upper body. So I'm trying to activate more through the lower of that left side, speaking to that shoulder blade on the same side to bring my hand forward. Stabilizing on one side to mobilize on the other. Carrying spine in between. And then if I reverse that, if I travel backwards, I can bring my hand in and then my knee. Hand and knee. And maybe my spine does have a little bit of condensing side-side. Maybe it stays very stable in the middle. If I condense, maybe that's easier, maybe not. And if your shins are starting to get a little tired or wrists are not happy, pause, give yourself a break. You can always explore this on forearms or on knuckles. And you can also explore it in a kind of reverse tabletop position, which is also a bit tricky through the wrists, but can be another kind of exploration of this side-sidedness, traveling either sideways or headwards or tailwards. And where does your axis of length become sensed in all of this? You can always bring your knees off the floor as well. So we have this weight shift, but also a sense of propulsion. Giving yourself a direction of travel means a reach and a push to propel you somewhere. It's not quite the same as simply shifting weight on a fixed basic support. There is this impetus to move. Okay, you can probably tell what's going to come next. I was trying to activate the body half pattern through this, and we'll now explore more of the cross-lateral pattern. And so in crawling, we can actually quite easily sense it through the reach of the hand, and you can feel how the opposite knee just wants to join in. Maybe for you, maybe not, but you can play with it, leading through the hand a little. And if you go backwards, leading through the knee. And you can also take it onto hands and feet. Sensing more this cross-lateral connection. Spine is active. Good. Let's go back to a seated heel rock to recuperate from all the crawling. And we were finding earlier maybe this sense of bringing the pelvis towards the heels, and you can use your hands to do that. So here we have a sagittal pelvic shift, bringing pubic bone forward, axis of length staying fairly vertical, and not collapsing in my spine to make that happen. And I can also bring my heels towards my bum, towards my sitting bones. But we're going to take this version to bring the pelvis over the knees. Now, if that's not available for your knee joints or for the length of your arms or for any other reason, it's not comfortable, feel free to go around the side. With lots and lots of walking hands onto ground. And you can come to all fours and then wend your way back again. Or you could come back through this sideways pattern. So you can see that's the diagonal knee drop position here, right? This position, you're coming back through that. And I'm taking it quite quickly, but you can take it a lot slower. And then we can start to add, if you wish, another level change. So from sitting, we can take a thigh lift and come up to 1 foot on the ground. And then from there, we've no longer got momentum because we've paused, but how is it to bring the pelvis forward to step? And if you do it with a little bit more momentum, you can find a bit of flow to get you off the ground. Finding the axis of length and eyes forward and high. And then to come back into the ground, many different ways to think about that or to do that. You can find maybe a rotation that we found earlier. This time, weight of skull, hand somewhere between the feet, making this triangular relationship. Feet can pivot, so this is the same knee drop action. And they carry on, knees keep going, thighs keep falling, so pelvis can find the ground, and you can come to sit that way. And then you can walk around again, and find feet a little wider, hand in the middle, pivoting knees and pelvis. And that will depend on your length of limbs, flexibility, your architecture. There's no rules for that at all. You might be much closer in. You might be a little bit further away. And you can use this knee drop, leg swing if you like to get off the floor also. You can come up to a circle, to a seated position, carry on the knees, carry on sliding that foot, carry on rotating through the lower to stand. Coming back down, reversing that pattern. But that's a lot of information and a lot of different things all on top of each other. Feel free to carry on playing with this one. Or this one. Also good. So yeah, playing with carrying your axis of length in different orientations, from sitting to standing, back into sitting. And seeing whether spine stays extended or whether spine rotates, whether spine condenses, extends, has some lateral flexion in it. Good. Okay, next time you come to standing, take a little walk and just feel how you're feeling walking. And then I'd like us to play with a bit of counterbalance, balancing through exploring the lunge, actually. So you can pause on one leg and feel the weight of arms and legs fairly extended. I'm reaching out quite a lot. Not so much that I become very rigid, and still fairly soft, but I'm not really here doing this. And to play with a sense of counterbalance in any direction, on a straight knee or a bent knee, and then I might step, carry on walking a little. To feel how my axis of length goes beyond the floor, into the floor, and beyond my skull through into the ceiling or to the sky if you're outside, and how limbs might find this counterbalance to the weight of the pelvis and the spine. And it's not really about staying in any one position forever, unless that would become an interesting challenge for yourself. It's more using balance as a way of testing the weight of your limbs. And your leg could really be just barely floating off the ground. And can you do this and still breathe? Not holding the breath to find balance. And when you've done on one foot for a while, you might simply step to the other foot. Or you might find that weight exchange through a little fall, where you catch yourself on the other foot. I mean, a step is a kind of fall also, but can you find that with a little bit more release? And then you might soften into that base of support to keep playing with the weight of limbs, weight of skull. Whatever you understand as your axis of length, and how that could flow in space a little. How does the whole of your body participate in balancing, suspending, weight shifting and falling? But whatever dynamic you would like, it could be much more quiet, it could be very big. If you have a lot of space, you're feeling very energized. And keep checking in with your breath. And in your fall, you might notice that your spine wants to condense a little bit, or rotate a little bit. Or maybe you keep it very stable and in the same alignment no matter where you are. Up to you to play with that. Often when I'm watching other people dance and I see something really wonderful through the limbs, I'm actually more interested in what their axis of length is doing, whether they ever let that go, or whether they keep it very stable the whole time and to keep mobilizing through the limbs. And after a certain point, if I don't see much change in the axis of length in terms of condensing or falling or spiraling, I tend to wonder how tiring it must be to kind of stabilize this spine the whole time. Let's refine from this suspending relative weights of limbs exploration. Let's refine journeying into the ground and back out again. Then you might play with a different base of support now on hands or shins or forearms. Putting these things together from where we started and finding this rotation of base of support. How we might find some different kinds of propulsion in and out of the floor. And as you do this, sometimes maybe getting into the flow of what you're finding, and at other times maybe pausing to sense in a little bit, where is your axis of length relative to gravity? And how might your eyes help you make some changes to your base of support through your axis of length? You might find some of these patterns that we were doing right at the beginning. How easy might they feel now? How would you take them in different orientations? Or maybe they don't feel easy at all, and that's also fine. Maybe they feel even more complicated. And then let's find 2 feet back on the ground and find yourself in standing once more. And taking a moment to close eyes and sense how you sense your body here. Connection of feet into ground. And this push from the soles of the feet, from the center of the earth, organizing your skeleton and your whole body upwards. How do you sense your right side and your left side? You might add a little sway as I say that, or a weight shift. How do you sense your front and your back? And with your eyes closed, just take one step. And still with eyes closed, take a step back again and just sense all that goes on to make that happen. With eyes closed, how much movement there is. And blink your eyes open. Let's gather together for a check-in and a chat about any of that.